Good morning to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to our weekly tropical weather outlook. Today, Saturday, February 8th, 2025. Gonna start off this week's video with something a little different. Taking a look at the global tropics this week, because as I always say, and as we've gone over multiple times, even if there's not activity happening right now, at least at this time of the year, in our neck of the woods in the northern hemisphere, there's always tropical activity. It's always hurricane season somewhere in the world, and it's especially the case right now. In the southern hemisphere, we have quite a bit of activity happening right now, multiple invests across the Pacific and near and around Australia. And there's even a few active tropical storms right now, including this storm, Cyclone Vince. And this is actually quite quite an infamous storm right now, especially in terms of the weather tracking sphere, because it did become a pretty powerful storm over the last several days. I think it's now beginning to weaken, but it did become quite an intense storm, and you can actually take a look at the satellite image. Has that classic strong look to it, and you can kind of see convection near the center or near the core kind of dying down. So this is probably on a weakening trend, but especially in the first few frames, you could see has quite a strong, almost donut-ish look to it. So it's definitely a very strong system. Got near Category 5 intensity, I believe. And let's actually see what the current intensity of this storm is, if the graphic will load. Currently, I think at Category 3, it's at major hurricane strength. So it's definitely a powerful system. Luckily, this is going to move out to sea and probably die out within the next few days and not impact any land. But certainly goes to show that there is tropical cyclone activity happening right now somewhere in the world. And it is certainly strong activity occurring right now, as it is currently the southern hemisphere's tropical season, and they're probably going to get a few more strong systems since their tropical season lasts till around April. So that's what's happening around the world right now. Let's now go to our neck of the woods, and we do that with the sea surface temperature anomalies. This is the latest map, updated as of February 6th. I guess the update from yesterday hasn't come out yet, but probably not that much different. So let's just use what we have right now. Currently in the Atlantic, still very warm in terms of sea surface temperature anomalies, especially out in the eastern Atlantic. We've seen, I guess, an increase in trade winds over the last several days, so I'm starting to see some of this colder patches emerge off of Africa. As we get towards the winter, usually the trade winds begin to strengthen, and we see some cooling occur out in the eastern Atlantic. But once again, it's only February, and sea surface temperature anomalies really change. And basically what we have right now, even though overall this is only just one or two patches off the coast of Africa, overall the Atlantic is still very warm. We're still months away from hurricane season, so this really doesn't have that much of a bearing of hurricane season right now, but it's still very interesting nonetheless. Warmth remains, especially off the northwest coast of Africa and off the Iberian Peninsula. And that actually is a good sign for hurricane season if this warmth does remain. And we also are, in the meanwhile, cold in the subtropics in general. And through the Caribbean and especially the Gulf of Mexico, boy, look at that. Very, very warm. It's been warm the entire winter, even as we had these huge Arctic fronts come down from the U.S. and we saw, the winter storm along the Gulf Coast several weeks ago. Even then, still, the Gulf remains extremely warm, well above normal. Some of these patches even as high as 3, even 4 degrees Celsius above normal. So the Gulf is definitely up there. And this will not only be interesting for hurricane season, obviously, if this persists. And with that, too, it's only February. We have a long ways to go, and we'll probably see some cooling, I'd assume, depending on, whenever we get the next Arctic front. But the fact that so far we've had multiple Arctic fronts come through, and really, the Gulf has not really cooled much at all. Very, very interesting, and this will also have an impact on severe weather season, too, because we have lots of moisture in the Gulf, especially given how warm the sea surface temperatures are, which will provide ample moisture. That'll then lift northward, obviously, and create a very good setup for severe weather season this year. Meanwhile, in the Pacific, we have, once again, La Nina still in place, although you're starting to see, once again, warming up occur, at least in the eastern Pacific. La Nina is still holding on, though, especially if you look at the anomalies in the central Pacific. But La Nina is probably going to begin to lose its steam. We're probably going to head towards neutral very soon, or at least over the next several weeks. But if we take a look at the SOI right now, very strongly positive. So I guess La Nina is holding on for now. I mean, you can take a look at the current 30-day average, 9 points above normal. So at least right now, atmospherically, we're still somewhat in a La Nina phase. The daily contribution very strong, 27 points. But I do find it very interesting, and I guess this does prove that La Nina really is beginning to lose its steam for right now. This is the sea surface temperature anomaly out of the Nino 3.4 region, and ever since the latter half of January, so at least the last 2 or so weeks, the Nino 3.4 has actually warmed up quite significantly. We were right around -1 degree Celsius, and since then we're pretty much, at least the latest value updated once again as of February 6th, so we're still a few days behind. But it's probably not that much of a difference anyways. We're at -0.5 degrees Celsius now, which is pretty much right on the threshold of weak La Nina into cool neutral. So La Nina is definitely beginning to lose its steam. Probably going to hold on for a few weeks, but I'd imagine once we get to spring, it'll probably die out. And you can see that especially when we look at the zonal wind anomalies. We do have trades in the Pacific, but notice especially in the eastern Pacific, which is pretty much east or to the right of this 180-degree line. Because if you're not familiar with how this chart works, I'm just going to explain it to you. Right here, this is the longitude map for the Pacific. So imagine, well, this is the longitude map of the world, but generally from 120 east to 120 west is generally where the Pacific is. And then this y-axis here, this is the dates. And then, by the way, this is generally a measure of the zonal winds along the equatorial Pacific. And you can see generally we have a bunch of these oranges and these reds coming up in the Pacific, which indicates that we're going to have westerly winds, or we're going to see weaker trade winds, especially when you compare it to previously. Over the last several weeks, we've actually had a lot much stronger trade winds, which is why we saw La Nina persistent for a while. But MJO is going to move into phases 7 and 8, meaning rising motion will be in the Pacific, and that means we'll have more westerly winds present, which in turn will obviously probably weaken the La Nina further. I mean, we're really on the brink of completely losing this La Nina, at least as of the latest values from the Nino 3.4. And I'd imagine with these weaker trades, we're probably also going to see the SOI as a result. This is probably going to crash very soon. So La Nina is definitely on its last legs. I'm pretty sure probably within the next few weeks, we're going to see La Nina on its way out of here. And this is going to be very, very important, especially as we get towards the spring, because it's going to mean a lot for what happens ENSO-wise by the time we get to the summer and fall for hurricane season, obviously. And we're looking at that, at least in terms of the forecast, what we could expect. Last week, I showed you the CFS forecast for the next several months. This week, I have the European forecast because it just recently updated for the February release. The monthly European, not the European model that we use for daily weather. But this is the European seasonal forecast for the Nino 3.4. And notice how over the next several months, especially as we get towards April and May, and as we get towards the summer months, notice the upward trend that we see in the Nino 3.4. So we're right now in La Nina, or we're in cooler ENSO. But then notice, especially as we get towards the summer, most of the ensembles of the European end up warming above 0 degrees. So this means that we're going to get into a warmer ENSO. And in fact, quite a bit of the ensembles, I think it's kind of a 50-50 split. Some that show us getting to warm neutral, and then some of them even push as high as probably El Nino territory. And it's all going to come down to how quickly do we see a weakening of the La Nina over the next several weeks. But at least as of the February update, the European seasonal is pretty adamant that over the next several months, especially once we get towards the spring, especially towards the summer, and this will be very important because we're starting to get towards, I guess they show it towards August now, the European seasonal. We see a warming up of the ENSO, and that'll obviously mean or have pretty significant implications on hurricane season this year. But I do want to point out, though, I am familiar that the European kind of sometimes has a tendency to overdo it a little bit, especially when it comes to El Nino and La Nina. Especially with El Nino, they sometimes jump the bandwagon quite a bit. So we'll see. But the European is one of multiple climate models, at least long range, that by the time we get to the summer, they show a warming of the ENSO enough that we might get into the warmer neutral category. And some, of course, not all, but some, obviously including the European, do bring us at least on a path towards El Nino. So that'll be something very interestingly that we watch over the next several weeks. How much do we see in terms of warming of the ENSO? And obviously that'll have implications for hurricane season. But it's still only February, and these climate models can change a lot. And sometimes you can't always trust the climate models, especially several months out, as proven last year. So we'll see what exactly happens, but very interestingly nonetheless, European definitely hinting by the time we get towards summer, maybe have to watch for an El Nino. We'll see, though. But that's enough of tropics, because there's really not much else to talk about besides that. Let's head towards U.S. weather, because there's actually quite a bit happening in terms of our neck of the woods, in terms of weather that's happening right now. Really active, especially with winter weather. Over the Northeast, you're going to have a system that'll move through today into tomorrow. And in fact, we're going to see a very huge uptick in winter weather this coming week. Going to have multiple systems that'll move across the U.S. and probably bring quite a bit of active weather for the northern half and the Northeast throughout this weekend. We'll probably have multiple chances for potentially a sizable winter storm or winter weather events for the eastern and northeastern part of the U.S. But we have one occurring today, actually, tonight. We do have winter weather advisories in effect and some winter storm warnings in effect for the Northeast and even through portions of the northern Midwest as well. But generally, potentially accumulating snow for parts of the Northeast, and really quickly going to zoom in, at least in my area for New York. Potentially snowfall and accumulating snow up to a few inches as far south as New York City and across the Northeast as well. Let me really quickly bring up the snow totals. Areas like New York City, and the lower Northeast along the Mid-Atlantic coast. 4 to 6 inches, at least that's what the National Weather Service expects. And then generally widespread 4 to 6 inches across northern New Jersey, southern New York, and far southern parts of Connecticut, and then generally throughout most of Connecticut and southern upstate New York, 6 to 8 inches. And then let's move up the coast just a little bit. Let's go to the Boston area, and Boston right now actually is under a winter storm warning, as well as pretty much all of Massachusetts except for Cape Cod. They're going to see lighter snow amounts, but generally Boston area 6 to 8 inches, northern Massachusetts on up into New England, or northern New England, 6 to 8, even some areas seeing as much as a foot of snow. And then generally for Connecticut, Rhode Island, and for most of Massachusetts, except for around the Cape area where they're generally going to see lower amounts of snow, probably because they'll see more mixing, and that'll also be the case in around New York City as well. Going to have a front end thump of snow, but then there'll be some mixing later on, and that's probably what's going to bring down the snow totals. But still, generally, 4 to 6, even 3 to 4 inches, depending on where you are. Either way, widespread snow event for pretty much of the Northeast. This is going to happen tonight into tomorrow, and then we're probably going to have more in terms of snow as we head into early next week. And then let's really quickly look at the Albany area for New York. Just kind of get an idea of what to expect when it comes to snow. Generally around Albany, they could see some areas, at least around Albany and general upstate New York, could see as much as 10 inches of snow, depending on where you are. National Weather Service, at least for generally the Albany area, upwards of close to 9 inches of snow, and then extending to northern New York, generally widespread areas of around 8 to 10 inches. So quite a bit of snow expected for quite widespread areas of the Northeast tonight and into tomorrow. So we have widespread winter storm warnings in effect. Let's see what the GFS shows, not only for tonight, but for this upcoming week, because it's going to be quite a bit of activity. So we have a low pressure moves in over the coast. You can see, depending on where you are, southern the southern New England, and then around the Mid-Atlantic area, northern New Jersey, around New York City and Long Island, and also eastern Pennsylvania. Mixing will be a factor, so we'll probably see some snow at the beginning, and then it'll move to mixing, and then portions of southern New Jersey, and then just generally in the Mid-Atlantic will be mostly mixing and rain. So it'll really be a Northeast and a New England event that will see lots of snow, but then that'll move out. This will be something that impacts tonight into tomorrow. That generally moves out by tomorrow evening. I guess you have some lake effect snow in upstate New York, and then we move into Monday. And then Tuesday, you see our next piece of energy develop. And some runs of the GFS brought this further north and made this a significant I-95 corridor or snowstorm, at least along the Mid-Atlantic coast. But the latest GFS runs, and generally the latest model runs, keep this as a suppressed storm to generally just the Mid-Atlantic, and areas as far north as New York City really don't get much in the way of anything at all. But this is still somewhat far out, so we'll still see shifts, and maybe the GFS will shift back north. But this is the second system, comes in Tuesday, brings snow to the DC area and Philly and parts of northern Virginia and West Virginia and Kentucky and places like that. And then another system right on the heels of that, once again for the northern Northeast and northern New England, Thursday. So we have even more snow, and then we get to Friday, I guess some rain for the Southeast, and then Saturday, and then into Sunday, and this is towards the end of next week, another system, once again for New England and the Northeast. So that's probably multiple areas seeing as much as maybe 2, even 3 feet of snow, depending on where you are. Very active when it comes to winter weather over the Northeast through this next week. If you're a winter weather lover, you'll probably enjoy it, but if not, unfortunately, we're looking at active winter weather this upcoming week, and it might last, I think, beyond this week, maybe into next week as well. This upcoming week I'm talking about, but beyond this upcoming week, it might last as well. The pattern is certainly looking active, and certainly it's been a very interesting winter. Not definitely unlike the last few. We've actually gotten some snow, and we've actually gotten cold this past winter. It seems like finally winter is making a comeback, and behaving like winter instead of just having 1 or 2 Arctic fronts and barely any snow. So I guess if you're a winter weather lover and you miss the snow, you'll be enjoying this. But if not, definitely have the snowplow prepared, um, and definitely make it a case to stay indoors over the next week, because especially across the Northeast, looking at a lot of snow coming up this week. And then when it comes to tropics, nothing much else to really say other than watch ENSO, and we'll have to see how quickly do we exit La Nina, and do we warm up enough to where we get to El Nino this summer and this fall for hurricane season. All things we'll be watching over the next several weeks, and I'll probably have video updates when it comes to the snow situation for the Northeast throughout the week. So stay tuned for that if you wanna stay up to date with winter weather. But besides that, though, really not much else to talk about. So probably gonna end it off here for today. Thanks for watching. If you like what you saw today, as always, I encourage you, like, comment, subscribe, share with family and friends as well. And of course, if you want to stay up to date and you want to get these videos, especially the weekly tropical weather videos that I do, turn on the notification bell as well. I post these videos every Saturday if you're new to the channel. And of course, I do other videos like winter weather, especially when there is an abundance of it, which we will have this upcoming week. So expect more videos from me as well this upcoming week too. And yeah, with that being said, stay safe, peace, love, and kindness to you all, and we will talk again probably very soon.